Not all shows are events, but UFC 241, that was an event. And that's exactly where we're going to start. So let's jump right in. But before talking about any one fight or moment in particular, a quick note on the card as a whole. Coming out of these pay-per-views, I usually have a standout moment that defines the event, but I actually struggled to pick one from this card. It was probably the Diaz Pettis spectacle, but do comment below with your pick of your favourite moment or fight from the event. I would love to hear it. So let's start at the top. Stipe Miocic is once again the UFC's heavyweight champion. And we all know the story by now. It was a rematch a year in the making. Daniel Cormier beat Stipe for the belt a little over a year ago, defended it once, and the former champ has been waiting for a rematch ever since. And early on, it looked like Cormier was about to do the double on Stipe, so to speak. He dominated the first round with that quick jab, right hand combination he's so effective with, and then a takedown with some excellent groundwork to follow up. And he was also pretty defensively sound throughout the whole first round, I thought. And there is a lot of talk about an adjustment that Stipe made in the fourth round, which was brilliant, and we will get to that. But an adjustment, or rather change in approach from Cormier in the second round, was probably just as important to the outcome. From round 2 into the finish, Cormier's leg kicks were virtually non-existent. The takedown threat was gone, be it intentionally on DC's part or else Stipe subtly changed his approach. And Cormier started to walk down Stipe instead of picking his moments to engage in close quarters. For the most part, they pretty much stood in front of each other and threw. And while I do think this change played a big part in Cormier's eventual demise, it was working initially. And it's something he's done in past fights. It's a big part of his game. And that's probably why he continued with this approach, even though his corner was demanding otherwise. Oh, and he must have been hanging out with his mate John Jones again, because, you know, those eye pokes were tasty. And I know I made that stupid joke last week, but, you know, it's accurate. Like DC's eye pokes. Actually, a quick hot take on the eye pokes. I don't think they are intentional in either fight. Firstly, Cormier doesn't seem like the type, but more importantly, they can be explained by what Cormier is actually doing. He loves to hand fight and parry in boxing range as he's jabbing, so eye pokes are always a risk. And I know it's actually against the rules to have an outstretched hand with your fingers open, so that is a problem. Anyway, as everybody has spoke about, because it was said in the broadcast, Stipe did make a great adjustment in the fourth round. And it really was a great adjustment. He started punching to the body and it paid off quickly. And it was the left hook to the body, the liver shot, that really done the damage. And somewhere in the world, Bas Rutten is really happy. And then the finish came from that. It was the left hook to the body and then a jab right cross. Perfect combination, and Bob's your uncle, it was over. And I have to say, all credit to Stipe, what he did wasn't easy. He handed Cormier his first heavyweight loss, and remember, Cormier was 15-0 at heavyweight coming into this fight. I think people forget that. So hats off to him, he's earned some Stipe wisers. Go enjoy them, my friend. But what's next? I'm personally not opposed to the trilogy. I think it'd only be fair if Miocic returned the favour to Cormier. Remember, Stipe didn't fight between the original and the sequel, and the original was arguably more decisive than this one. It was quicker at the very least. And if Cormier used to call it career, which I have no problem with either, it's probably going to be a rematch with Ngannou for Stipe. And in terms of DC's potential retirement, I wouldn't be surprised if he did retire, but my sense of the situation is that he'll want that rematch. Before the fight, he said when he does retire, it won't be because he can't compete at the highest level, it'll be because it's the right time. And while retiring after this fight won't prove that he can compete at the highest level, not at all, the idea that his rival might point to that would probably eat him up a little bit. I mean, he's a competitor to his core. If the rematch was available, I think he takes it. But time will tell. And did you catch Max Holloway's love letter of sorts to Daniel Cormier? It's pretty heavy. It warmed this man's heart. And don't feel ashamed if you cried. I might have shed a little bit of a tear. Just a little one. But you know, it is what it is. Oh, and another thing, did you catch Stipe Miocic's celebration after the fight? His little Irish jig. Brilliant stuff. He said he didn't realise what he was doing and he just got caught up in the moment, and I can imagine what was going on in his head at that time.
Embarrass yourself like that in front of all those goddamn people.
In the co-main event, Nate Diaz returned to the octagon after 3 years and beat Anthony Pettis by unanimous decision. And man, I loved everything about this fight. Despite a world title fight at the top of the card, it was clear that this was the real needle mover, and context is key. If I were to tell you that a 34-year-old fighter with a record of 19 wins and 11 losses was returning to the UFC after 3 years sitting on the shelf to fight an opponent who lost 6 of his last 10 fights, you would be rational in your dismissal of it as an inconsequential feature. But you'd be wrong. And as I said, context is key, and for Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis, context was everything. The result could honestly shape the UFC's landscape for 2019 and beyond, and I think the result might have. It didn't have the prize or finishing sequence that the main event had, nor did it have the chaos that the lead-in had, and we will talk about that next. But what it did have was a real big fight atmosphere with all those characteristics that come with that. And it really did prove how big of a bona fide star Nate Diaz really is. I mean, even the commission dude knew it. Look at that guy's face. He is loving life. Man, I laughed so much when I saw that. That guy is loving life. Early on, what I saw was an acknowledgement from both fighters that they knew where they needed to be to find success. Pettis wanted to be at kicking range, and Diaz wanted to either be in the clinch for dirty boxing mostly, or in the pocket. And for me, Pettis won that first battle. He kicked Nate's legs and made him pay when he tried to force himself into the clinch. Nate had his first real moment with a nice single leg takedown. It was a fundamental single leg you'd learned in your first few jiu-jitsu classes. Lovely stuff. And once on top and dismissing the guillotine attempt from Pettis, which never really had a chance, Diaz showed some great passing to get to the back. And the rest of the fight was classic Diaz. One thing I do want to point out is how good his clinch work is as a striker. It's phenomenal. Watch what he does. It's textbook and super effective. He leans on his opponent, making them carry his weight while hand fighting. While doing this, he digs his head into position to break his opponent's posture while using it as a fulcrum point for opening up his strikes. And the hand fighting for me might be the coolest little detail. He'll hand fight and try capture one, which allows him to either land strikes, usually knees or short hooks, or else he'll break with a hook or an elbow and have the advantage for the follow-up due to the trapped hand. And at the same time, this and all those other little details makes his opponent work and expend energy, which just plays into his game plan. He's not a brawler in this position. It's all actually very technical. So all this compounded with everything else usually makes his opponent break. And speaking of breaking, can we try define it? I notice a lot of people noting that fighters are fading or breaking, and I think they should mean different things. I'd like to have a concrete word for whether it's self-inflicted or whether it's due to their opponent's work. I don't think Pettis slowed down due to anything he'd done wrong. He looked in shape, and for the most part when he was on the offense, it was pretty efficient. But he slowed down due to Nate breaking him down. I don't know, I just think we should give credit where credit's due. Also, it does look like Pettis broke his foot sometime in the fight, so, that couldn't have helped. Anyway, let me get off that tangent and move on. When he was sitting out for those 3 years, I saw people question how he would look after those 3 years off, and also if his star would dwindle at all. And I think we did see some rust, sorry Dominic, but he still looked great. And in terms of his star, I think it's safe to say it's bright. Even Dana admitted that he was a huge star in this great moment.
Do you think that we have another, Rousey, McGregor level star with Nate Diaz, given the way people are reacting to him now?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to deny. Yeah. He's a needle mover now.
I mean, he felt like a big star, even outside the MMA circles. He was always going to get a hero's welcome in California, but I saw Luke Thomas tweeting that 2 of his post-fight interviews were both trending in the top 5 on YouTube, with the in-cage one trending at number 1. And that's a big deal. That's not just inside our little MMA bubble that we live in. And then he called out Jorge Masvidal. And yes, please. That fight is super necessary, and I'm not surprised by the call out, motherfucker. Actually, I am. I just wanted to say that. It was too easy. I mean, there was talk of the fight from both sides since Masvidal blew up over the last few months. But I felt like it came a little out of left field, and I'm not sure why. Just a little. I don't know why. It just did. Either way, I love it. Clearly, Masvidal loved the call out too. I mean, just look at his face. I'm not sure who was loving life more, him or that commission guy. They're both pretty happy. And I know a lot of people expected some kind of Conor McGregor call out, but I never expected that. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't believe Diaz when he says he doesn't want that fight anymore, because I think there are plenty of reasons why he should. But I do think he's too proud to pursue it at this point, and rightfully so. This was his moment. And it's kind of funny and kind of awesome at the same time, just how this sport works sometimes. We're in 2019, and 2 absolute OGs of the game, Jorge and Nate, who started fighting professionally in 2003 and 2004 respectively, are now 2 of the biggest stars in the sport, and might potentially scrap in one of the most anticipated fights the UFC could put on right now. And I'm just glad they found their worth. And speaking of worth, a shout out to Luke Thomas, who made this great video about self-worth pertaining to Nate Diaz, but it applies to everybody. I do recommend checking it out. It's really good. I'll put the link in the description below. Oh, on top of that, Nate was reportedly paid a $250,000 flat fee for his return. And while not chump change, considering he earned $500,000 to fight McGregor at last minute and $2 million for the rematch, you gotta feel he made more in this fight in some kind of bonuses or pay-per-view points. I mean, I hope so. But as I said at the start, Nate winning here is a big deal. There are usually 2 or 3 big narratives in the calendar year for the UFC, and Diaz is in good position to be one of those in 2019. So we'll see. In the Coco main, and yeah, I'm gonna call it that because it does deserve it. Paulo Costa edged out Yoel Romero, and didn't I tell you that it's going to look like a pro wrestling match of the 80s? These guys are on a different level when it comes to athleticism. And you can talk about PEDs all you like because they do look, thick, solid, tight. And I made that silly joke last week because it's just easy. and I'm an idiot. But you can't get to that level of athleticism or physique from just drugs. You just can't do it. So whether or not they're on anything or not, and they haven't technically tested positive for knowingly taking anything, so there is that. Just know that the vast majority of you, me included, will never look like them, no matter what we take. Anyways, onto the fight. It's certainly an early candidate for fight of the year. For me, it's right up there with Adesanya versus Gastelum. And it sort of played out as expected, at least early on. Costa put on the pressure and dropped Romero with a left hook. Romero immediately returned the favour and dropped Costa, but to me it looked like he was off balance rather than it being a clean knockdown. And for those wondering how I scored the fight, that was a clear 10-9 for Costa for me. Midway through the second round, Romero switched it up a little, and as noted last week, he likes to play the matador, explode and burst, and not really push a steady pace, but that wasn't really working. And Costa was slowing down, which isn't surprising considering his insane output for the first half of the fight. So Romero increased his output and things did change a little bit. It wasn't crazy output from Romero. He just started touching Costa, but you could see how it affected Costa. He found it a lot more difficult to get off his combinations when he wasn't the aggressor. And this is where the scorecards were likely decided. I mean, do you score the round for Romero based on the later work, or for Costa, who probably won the first half of the round? It's a tough one. And for me, I'd honestly be fine with a 10-10 round, but I understand why judges don't want to do that, and I think they're actively discouraged from doing it. And in a way, I do get that. Their job is to go in there and decide a winner. And they should be able to separate a fighter's success and determine a winner. But man, it is hard. And then the third round was just carnage, and it was a clear 10-9 to Romero. And I know I said this already, but he is a freak. It's crazy. He was walking through Costa's offense like it was nothing. And that guy hits hard. And to give credit to Costa, he did slow down. It was clear to see. But it wasn't detrimental, and he was still mentally strong. And it's great to see somebody so physically gifted, when pushed mentally, that they still stay in there and they don't give up. That'll serve him really well going forward. And we actually saw something similar happen to a potential future opponent in Israel Adesanya in his fight with Kelvin Gastelum. He had to really deal with adversity, and honestly, when these talented fighters show they've got the intangibles, it makes me way more excited about their prospects. And I was fine with Costa getting the nod here. I feel for Romero because I can see a scenario where the scorecards do go in his favour, but it wasn't a robbery. Not at all. And I also think you have to be a certain kind of asshole to sit in the crowd and boo after that fight is over. I really fucking hate that shit. And I understand there were probably plenty of Romero fans who were upset with the decision. And in a way, those boos were directed towards the judges and not Costa. But the guy is trying to do a post-fight interview after going through 15 minutes of hell, and you're trying to drown him out with your booing? Fuck you. But it looks like he'll be the next middleweight contender, and that sounds good to me. A fight between either Whittaker or Adesanya will be a lot of fun. But the Adesanya one is personal though, so the UFC might be banking on that. And you might be asking why it's personal. We'll take a look at this takedown from Adesanya and Costa's response. That's right, Adesanya went there. He called him dinosaur arms, and now Costa wants to kill him. Fair enough. There are plenty of other standouts from the card, but I don't want to get into everything. So quick shout outs to Sadiq Yusuf, Karma Wardy, and Corey motherfucking Sandhagen. And who am I kidding? I'm going to talk about Corey motherfucking Sandhagen. This guy is a serious talent. And this is a little tangential, but stay with me, it's going to circle back to Sandhagen. MMA in its early days was all about style versus style. Eventually fighters moved on to become, quote, mixed martial artists. It was a move away from being a specialist and being able to simply survive outside their own realm to being able to do a little bit of everything. In my mind, what a mixed martial artist is somebody who can free fight. It's about fighting without seams. And what I mean by this is you're not moving from striking to wrestling to jiu-jitsu in separate visible steps. Those steps or seams are invisible. When you look at someone like Demetrius Johnson fight, there are no seams. He's free fighting. And that's the sense I get from Sandhagen. And I think that's why he's so difficult to deal with. And he fights with so much confidence too. He looked great against the Sun Tzu, and he's a guy who it's honestly very difficult to look good against. So he's definitely one to keep an eye on. So before I move on from UFC 241, just two other notes. I don't think I'm a fan of these mid-fight interviews with coaches. I mean, it's a good idea in principle, but in practice, nah. To me, what it looks like is when you're really enjoying a fight and somebody is trying to talk to you and all you want to do is just watch the scrap, but you're trying to still respond to the guy. It's kind of annoying, and the big difference here is that these coaches are actually trying to coach their fighter. So yeah, it's a no from me, dog. But I also saw a tweet from Megan O'Leary where people were criticising her for the idea, when it was most definitely not her idea. It's not like she just jumped in front of coaches and started interviewing them. It's a production thing, but yeah, not for me. The other thing is Kolby Covington. And it's hard to say whether his heat is X-Pac heat, but there was an audible Kolby sucks chant when he was shown on the screen. And apparently people start trying to fight him in the crowd, fighters included. So yeah, I don't know if it's the type of heat that will get people to tune in because they want to see him lose, or they just want them off the screen. But yeah, that's just something we'll have to wait and see. Looking ahead to the coming week of fights, it's a rare week where there is no UFC Fight Night event or UFC pay-per-view. They will though hold a Contender Series which happens tonight, but in its place on Saturday Bellator 225 goes down featuring a rematch between Matt Mitrione and Sergey Karatanov. But aside from that, there's not too many other fights this weekend. And here's everything else that you should know this week. Kyoji Horiguchi was knocked out in a huge upset at Ryzen 18. Amanda Nunes versus Jermaine Durandamy 2 is set for UFC 245. Darren Till hints at a fight with Kelvin Gastelum. Ariel Helwani later tweeted that that fight, along with Aljamain Sterling versus Frankie Edgar, are in the works for UFC 224 in Madison Square Garden. And finally, Conor McGregor is in the news. CCTV footage was released of McGregor punching an older man in a pub for reportedly refusing McGregor's whiskey, and this is just completely indefensible. And I don't know how old the guy was. There's some reports saying he was an elderly gentleman and some other reports saying that he was much younger, like in his 40s or something, but that doesn't really matter anyway. And I thought some of the reactions I saw over Fight Week were completely off the mark, especially from Dana White and Anthony Pettis. Dana essentially said that it was no big deal and that people get punched every day in pubs in Ireland, but from my experience, it doesn't seem like an epidemic to me. But either way, that's not the point. It's his dismissal of the situation that I find really strange. Plus, I mean, McGregor is a multi-fucking millionaire. Like, what the fuck is he doing? What is he like? It's fucking mind-boggling, man. As for Pettis, he said he'd like to know what the guy said to McGregor before passing judgment. But for me, that's kind of stupid as well. I mean, there's virtually nothing that guy could have said to deserve a cheap shot like that. But man, it's getting boring seeing McGregor in situations like this. And as far as I know, this wasn't recent, so hopefully nothing has happened in between. But it's just boring. Anyway, that's a place to leave it. That's all I got. If you like this video, please hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds. It's below and it does help us out quite a lot. And hey, share it with your friends. That would also help us out. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and let's get this subscriber count up. We have these videos every week. We have a podcast. We're going to bring back the live chat, which I'm really excited about. So hit that notification bell as well so you can get these notifications. Cheers again. Talk soon.